Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulih al-Kareem. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa salam tasliman kathira. So we continue now. And as Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, as I alluded to you guys in the previous Abadila, with him you really find the majority of his life is actually within the fitna, trying to figure out what his role is and how he should serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this. And as we said, subhanAllah, if we look at the previous approaches so far that we've taken, there are three very different approaches from Ibn Abbas, from Ibn Amr, and Ibn Umar. Three very different approaches. Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu takes the most aggressive approach. And there's no doubt that that has a lot to do with his personality. Right? He grew up a man of courage. He grew up a man of bravery. And that's not to say that the other Sahaba were not like that. But he wasn't one for halaqas. He was one for the battlefield. You know, subhanAllah, he was one that would just stand up to any tyrant, no matter who it may be, and that always felt a sense of justice. Now, with Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was extremely close to him, as was his father, and as all the Sahaba. You won't find a man that's more lovable than Uthman radiallahu anhu. You know, just in terms of his personality. Again, his softness, his generosity, his leniency. Right? The one that the Prophet ﷺ even said, أَلَا أَسْتَحِي مِنْ رَجُلٍ تَسْتَحِي مِنْهُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. Like, should I not feel shy from a man that the angels feel shy from? From Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, like his father, has a deep attachment to Uthman, and the Sahaba were absolutely devastated when Uthman was killed. As Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu went out to Mecca, as did Talha, and that's where they came together with Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha and a large group of Sahaba and a large group of people demanding the retaliation against those who killed Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and they made their way towards Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and they met Ali radiallahu anhu. Abdullah ibn Zubayr was with his father on that day. Now, what happens the night before the Battle of Al-Jamal takes place, as we already made clear in the previous ones, that a group of people attacked both sides so that they would fight each other. The night before, when Az-Zubayr in particular is standing there with Ali radiallahu anhu reminds Az-Zubayr of that moment that one day he was sitting with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Az-Zubayr, "Atuhibbu Ali ya Zubayr? Do you love Ali, O Zubayr?" And Zubayr said, "Of course I love Ali." I mean, they were best friends. Talha, Zubayr, Ali, these guys were all the same age. They were constantly around each other. They were the young men around the Sahaba of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he said, "Of course." And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Tuqatilhu wa anta lahu zalim." You will one day fight against him, and you will be the zalim. You will be the oppressor. When Ali reminded Az-Zubayr of that incident, Az-Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu broke down into tears. Now you have to understand, now you would say to yourself, how could Az-Zubayr forget something like that in the first place? When Uthman died, Az-Zubayr radiallahu anhu was one of the most emotional people. And Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was the one who said, Allahumma khudh minni li Uthman hatta tarda. Oh Allah, take from my blood in the cause of Uthman until you're pleased. That's how emotional he was. Like, I don't mind dying right now for the sake of, to avenge the death of Uthman radiallahu anhu. So he's incredibly, incredibly emotional. This is a devastating loss for him. But when Ali reminded him of that, as Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu had nothing to do with the battle. In fact, narration seems to suggest he took bay'ah to Ali at that moment. So he actually gave his allegiance to Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Now when they went back to their camps, obviously, he's still in the other camp because that's who he came with. That night, as things start to take place, Abdullah, he says some very, very, very interesting things. He says in a hadith from Hisham ibn Urwa, he said that on the day of the battle of Al-Jamal, he says that Az-Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he came to me and he said, Ya bunay unzur. He said, oh my son, look at me. And so he said, I looked at my father. And he said he pulled up his garment and he showed me his legs. And there wasn't a single part of his body except that there was a wound. And he showed me his entire upper body. And he showed me that there wasn't a single part of it except that there was a wound. And he said that all of these wounds were suffered alongside the Prophet ﷺ in defense of Rasulullah ﷺ. What is he telling him? He's telling him that what I fought for in the past was always noble. These were honorable causes. Not a single part of my body was not struck in the cause of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And now there is an extremely long narration. And this narration, it kind of departs from the fitna, but it's significant. And you know, you might get lost in it because there's a lot of math in it. All right? Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, he also says that Az-Zubayr called me on the day of Al-Jamal and he said to me, Ya bunay, he said, oh my son, today one is either going to be killed as an oppressor or an oppressed one. He said that I think that Allah Azza wa Jal would grant me the opportunity of being killed as a madhloom, as being one who's oppressed, who dies as an oppressed person. He says, but the thing that worries me most is my debts. Rasulullah ﷺ always told people to fear their debts, to try to pay off their debts before they die. And the Prophet ﷺ said that, you know, when a person dies, if your family member, pay off their debts, because their debts hold them. Okay, they hold them back. Now, Zubayr, as we said, was a man that lived in poverty. He was a very poor man. And, you know, he's always going out in battle. So his poverty grew and he had a lot of debts. So he said to his son, he said, you know, sell all of my property. I don't know how much I have. And the reason why he had property is because it was given to him after these battles as a form of ghanima. These were the spoils of battle. He's given a lot of land because Zubayr participated in a lot of battles. So he owns a lot of land. So he said, sell all of the property and pay off my debts. And Zubayr radiallahu anhu then said, 1/3 of it, you know, he willed obviously 1/3 for the family and 1/3 of it to pay off his debts. And then he said 1/3 for sadaqah. 1/3, let me repeat that. 1/3 of that is to his sons. And then he willed 1/3 to Abdullah's sons in particular. So obviously his love for Abdullah out of all of his children, his preference for Abdullah, he willed 1/3 of his wealth to Abdullah's sons. And then he said, whatever you can use to pay off my debts, then do so. Now, Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when that happened, he said, you know, what do I do if I don't have enough money to pay off your debts? Because you have a lot of debts. So Az-Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, whenever you feel like you're unable to pay my debts, ista'an bi mawlai. Seek help from my master. Okay, now mawla usually means master in the worldly sense, not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So ista'an bi mawlai means like my master usually in the worldly sense, okay? So he said, I didn't know what he meant when he said ista'an bi mawlai, seek help from my master. He said until as the battle was getting closer, or as things were starting to get out of hand, he said, I went to him and I said, the last thing he says to his father, he says, Ya Abi, who is your master? And Az-Zubayr smiled and he said, Allah. Okay? So Az-Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, once the battle started, Az-Zubayr radiallahu anhu, he walked away because he didn't plan to fight anyway. So when he saw Sahaba fighting and when he saw that this thing started, Az-Zubayr radiallahu anhu just left the battlefield. There was a man by the name of Amr ibn Jarmus who was one of the people of fitna. Amr ibn Jarmus, he followed him and he asked him, he said, can I be your companion in this journey? So Az-Zubayr said, sure. Once Az-Zubayr radiallahu anhu started his salah, he killed him. Okay, so he killed him in his salah. And subhanAllah, he brought his arms to Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, thinking that he would get rewarded by Ali because he killed Az-Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So he brought to Ali radiallahu anhu the arms and the sword of Az-Zubayr, seeking reward from Ali. Ali was sitting in his tent and he was trying to figure out how to clean up the mess that had happened, which was again a battle that wasn't intended and so on and so forth. So Ali didn't want to see anybody. So this man says, you know, take the sword to him. And in one narration, take whatever these arms to him. It's gruesome stuff, right? So take this to him. And when Ali radiallahu anhu saw the sword, Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he screamed out loud and he said, Bashiru qatil ibn Safiya bin nar. Give glad tidings give the news to the one who killed Az-Zubayr with hellfire. He said, I heard the Prophet ﷺ say that whenever you see the killer of Az-Zubayr, this is actually a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, Bashiru qatil ibn Safiya bin nar. Tell him he's going to hell. So when Ali screamed this out, before Ali could get out to that man, the man ran away and he committed suicide. Okay, Amr ibn Jarmus. So Az-Zubayr radiallahu anhu, he died as a shaheed in the Battle of Jamal, even though he didn't fight in the Battle of Jamal. Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhu was wounded severely, but Abdullah survived that battle. And Abdullah, his concern is, how do I pay off the debts of Az-Zubayr? Because that was obviously his major concern. So he said that, so I started, as soon as Az-Zubayr died, he said, I started, looking to who he owes money to. And he said, whenever I had difficulty, I would say, Ya Mawla Zubayr. I would call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the words, O Master of Zubayr. And he said, things would start happening. Like miracles would start happening. So he said, I found that when he died, he had not a single dinar or a dirham. No money. He had he had two pieces of land. He had one that was called Al-Ghaba, a piece of land in Al-Ghaba. And he said he had all these houses that were given to him as ghanima that he never used. So he had 11 houses in Medina that he came to find out about, 2 houses in Basra, 1 in Kufa, and 1 in Egypt. As Zubayr was so busy in battle, he doesn't even know what he's accumulating here. So all this stuff is being collected and he has no idea. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr is constantly finding out about all of these types of things. So he said that, I would call out to the people. And he said the reason why Zubayr had so many debts is because people would come to him and they would try to give him money as a gift and he'd say, no, I'll pay you back. Right? So Zubayr just wouldn't take gifts. That's the problem. So no, I'll pay you back. So all of this stuff, accumulated and he owed so much money. He said when I counted his debts, he owed 2,200,000 dirhams. So I said to myself, wow. All right, here we go. I said to myself, subhanAllah, how am I going to pay off this debt? So he said, I met Hakim ibn Hizam. And Hakim ibn Hizam, he asked me, he said, and Hakim ibn Hizam is the relative of Khadija radiallahu anha, the cousin of Khadija radiallahu anha. So Hakim ibn Hizam said, oh my nephew, how much debt do you owe for my brother Az-Zubayr? So Abdullah, he didn't want to say how much it was. He said, maybe 100,000. Hakim said, I don't think that your property, the property that you have is going to cover 100,000. So Abdullah said, what if I told you it was 2,200,000? So Hakim said, then you definitely can't pay it. And he said, let me help you. So basically what they did was, they went to the land of Al-Ghaba and they said, who wants to buy this one land, Al-Ghaba? So, and as Abdullah says, the whole time I was saying, Ya Mawla Zubayr. O Master of Zubayr. He said someone came and he bought it for 1,600,000. All right, so that took care of the major part of it. He said, then I called the people and I said, anyone who has money that's owed to him by Zubayr, come to Al-Ghaba. So they came forward. Okay, and Abdullah ibn Ja'far came and Az-Zubayr owed him 400,000 dirhams. That's Abdullah ibn Ja'far. Abdullah ibn Ja'far, he said, I forgive the debt. Abdullah ibn Zubayr said, no. He said, then if you want, you can defer the payments, and you can pay later. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr said, no. Abdullah ibn Ja'far said, fine, give me a piece of another one of his land. So he gave him that land and that takes care of it. That's 400,000 down. He said, then he went to Muawiyah and Amir ibn Uthman and Al-Mundhir ibn Zubayr. So he just goes through all of these names. And he keeps on going. Okay, here's 100,000 for this share. And then he went to Hajj the next year and he called out, if Az-Zubayr owes you money, come forward. So they came forward. He said, and every time he found it difficult, he would say, Ya Mawla Zubayr. He said, by the time I finished paying off his debts and then distributing his property amongst his family, he said, even after that, the total amount that was left over was 50,200,000. SubhanAllah. He had all this money that he never knew about. Right? And the power of this hadith obviously is as Zubayr's tawakkul when he was dying, ista'an bi mawlai. Just seek help from my master. Don't worry, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of it. And look at the end of this. This is a very, very long hadith. It's in Al-Bukhari. Go read the whole thing because I paraphrased the hadith obviously because of the situation. Now back to the situation. As Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was killed, Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was one of the people that was fighting on the other side. Okay, so he actually took part in the battle. And I just want to mention a few things here now, before I get to the fitna, his relationship with the other Sahaba, because I think that's important here. One of my intentions for speaking about the fitna is to show you guys the human side. All right? Who did we say loves him most from the wives of the Prophet ﷺ? Aisha radiallahu anha. I mean, her kunya is Abdullah. She's his mother. But one time he upset Aisha. And he upset her so badly that she boycotted him. Okay, now I want to give you guys the situation here. Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, this is later on in his life, and it seems like this is when he's ruling, when he's in charge of Mecca. At least he's in charge of Mecca. And Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, The narration doesn't say exactly what she was doing, but in essence, someone gives her a gift and she sells the gift or something like that. She's selling gifts that are given to her. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he passed a comment. And he said, Wallahi, if Aisha doesn't stop, then I'll declare her to be incompetent to dispose of her wealth. Meaning I'll take her money and I'll manage it from now on. He said it out of, a moment of heedlessness. People make mistakes. That's the point. People say things they're not supposed to say. That, in essence, he accused her. He said, she's going crazy. I'll take care of her money from now on if I have to. When that news reached Aisha radiallahu anha, she was so upset that she said, Wallahi, I will never speak to Abdullah ibn Zubayr again. Can you imagine? She's saying that about her son, about her nephew. Right? Wallahi, I will never speak to him again. When he heard about that, he got so overwhelmed, like, al-Mu'mineen, she's the mother of the believers and she doesn't want to talk to me anymore. She was so hurt, and subhanAllah, that's the point. Can you imagine like your son saying that about you, right? And this is Abdullah ibn Zubayr, and she is al-Mu'mineen. So he started to send people to her to seek intercession. And Aisha radiallahu anha said, I will not accept the intercession of anybody. I don't want to talk to him. And she said, I don't want to commit a sin by breaking my vow. She took a qasam, she took an oath that I won't speak to him anymore. So as this went on, Abdullah ibn Zubayr was so sad because he would go to seek her permission to speak to her. She didn't want to speak to him. That he goes to some of the elders of the Sahaba. Okay? And he says to them to seek permission from Aisha radiallahu anha to enter her home. Because Aisha radiallahu anha, her home was open. She was behind her, the curtain, and she would give fatwas and so on and so forth, and she would give speeches and she'd give advice. So there were three people that, and their names are Al-Miswar ibn Makhrama, Al-Miswar ibn Makhrama, Abdurrahman ibn al-Aswad, and Abu Yaghuth. So he goes to them and he says, can you guys seek permission, and then I'll kind of come in with you. So they walk in. And they say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. She says, Wa alaikum assalam. She says, come on in. As soon as they come in, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, he goes behind the curtain and he grabs Aisha radiallahu anha. This is the humanist, wallahi. And he starts to cry and he starts to apologize, and she starts to cry as well. And subhanAllah, it's very emotional between them. And she's so upset though. She's, how could you say something like that? Like, how could you make that statement? In front of, not just amongst, in front of so many people. How could you make a statement like that? And so, Al-Miswar and Abdurrahman, they start to tell Aisha radiallahu anha, forgive him and the virtues of forgiveness. And she says, well, I don't know what to do because I took an oath not to speak to him anymore. So even if I forgave him, I don't know what to do because I took an oath that I wouldn't speak to him anymore. So Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she forgave him, and she freed 40 slaves as a kafara for her oath that she'd never speak to him again. And subhanAllah, every time she used to remember that incident, the hadith says she used to cry so much that her veil would become wet with tears. So they're human, subhanAllah. They had, and what that shows you more than anything else, obviously, is that the Sahaba, they would make these types of mistakes. They're capable of messing up with a statement here or there. But what does he do? He goes and he seeks forgiveness, and he goes to, knowing her station, knowing that she is his mother, right, goes and hugs her and cries on her shoulder. He doesn't have that pride and says, I don't have anything to do with her. So their relationship was a very solid relationship. SubhanAllah, this is a very long narration which mentions, and this is in Al-Bukhari as well, it mentions an argument that they had. But when Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha was passing away, this is also in Al-Bukhari, she sent a letter to Abdullah ibn Zubayr with her wasiyah, with her will. So, she entrusts him with that. And she says to Ibn Zubayr, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, she says, don't bury me with the Prophet ﷺ and his two companions. Don't bury me with Rasulullah ﷺ and Abu Bakr and Omar. But instead, bury me with the other wives of the Prophet ﷺ in Al-Baqi'. He said, because I don't want people to think that I'm better than I actually am. I don't want people to put me on a level higher than the other wives of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, when Aisha radiallahu anha was younger, she had dedicated a grave in the room for her. And actually, Omar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he sent Abdullah ibn Umar to ask permission if he could be buried there instead. And she said she wouldn't give it to anyone but Omar. So Omar radiallahu anhu was buried there. There's still space there for another person. So she thought, subhanAllah, and that she would be the one that would be buried there. But whenever she came to the end of her life, she tells Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, to bury me in Al-Baqi'. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he's the one that actually carried out the janazah and the burial of our mother Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. As far as Ibn Abbas is concerned, so with Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, there's a lot of friction, arguments about fiqh matters and so on and so forth. Right? Ibn Zubayr is a lot stricter than Ibn Abbas, and also politically speaking, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu does not agree with the revolt of Ibn Zubayr. Ibn Abbas preferred more of a diplomacy, neutrality, so on and so forth. Ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was quicker to a revolt, okay, to revolt against the tyrant. All right, so they disagreed with each other, but subhanallah, there's this hadith also. It's narrated in Sahih Muslim that Ibn Abi Mulaika radiallahu anhu, Ibn Abi Mulaika, he says that I saw Ibn Abbas and Ibn Zubayr have an argument. So I went to Ibn Abbas the next day and I said, do you want us to fight against Ibn Zubayr? And and make lawful what Allah has made unlawful? Meaning, do you want us to fight against him here in Mecca? And Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, A'udhu billah. He said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained him to be in charge. And he said that the people asked me to take bay'ah to him, and I gave bay'ah to him. And he said he is entitled to assume authority more than any one of us. His father was the Hawari of the Prophet ﷺ. He was the helper of the Prophet ﷺ. His grandfather is Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, his companion in the cave. His mother is Asma radiallahu ta'ala anha. His aunt is Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. His paternal aunt is Khadija radiallahu anha. And his grandmother is Safiya radiallahu ta'ala anha. He's saying, no one has more right to him. And he said, فَإِنَّهُ تَقِي نَقِي عَالِمٌ فِي الْقُرْآنِ. That he's a pure, chaste person, and he's knowledgeable in the Qur'an. And he said that, and he said that there's nothing between me and him. Meaning, even when they argued over fiqhi things and things of that sort, there is nothing between them. Also, Ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu was known for his sadaqah. Him and Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, they used to encourage one another to give sadaqah. So they used to compete in sadaqah. And they were also business partners. Okay? Ibn Zubayr and Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu were also business partners. And Ibn Zubayr, where did he learn that from? He said, I don't know who was more generous in my house, Asma or Aisha. He said, as for Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she used to give everything that she got right away. As for my mother Asma, she used to collect and save and save and save, then she would give it away in sadaqah. I don't know who's more generous, my mom or my aunt Aisha. And Ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu used to compete. يُسَابِقُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ. That's يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ. They used to compete with one another in giving sadaqah. With Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, again, there are a few arguments that are narrated, but Ibn Abbas constantly reinforces his authority. Maymun al-Makki, he said that I saw Ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu leading the salah, and the way, he's describing the salah of Ibn Zubayr, and he said that I went to Ibn Abbas and I said, I've never seen anyone praying like that. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu responded, he said, إِذَا أَحْبَبْتَ أن تنظر إلى صلاة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, then look, if you want to see the salah of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, look at the salah of Ibn Zubayr. So there's a respect between Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu with him as well. And in fact, Ibn Abbas tells him on the day that he would become the Khalifa, he tells him the proper way to take the oath from people and the proper way to do his khutbah and so on and so forth. So there's a relationship between those abadila, right? And largely, all of the abadila, because I'm going to get into the fitna right now, all of the abadila had the same political affiliations, if you will. They all had the same opinion, they had different approaches. All right, so you find that they all had the same opinion, they had different approaches. So now let's go to the political situation so we can properly understand how Ibn Zubayr finds himself in charge. Al-Hasan radiallahu ta'ala anhu goes and he makes peace with Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. And one of the conditions between Al-Hasan and Muawiyah is that if Muawiyah passes away and Al-Hasan is still alive, that Al-Hasan radiallahu anhu is the next Khalifa. That's one of the stipulations of this agreement. All right? Now, if Muawiyah radiallahu anhu was an evil man, he would have just killed Al-Hasan, right? This khilafah lasted for a long time. Al-Hasan radiallahu anhu died 9 years later, but still before Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Okay, so Al-Hasan radiallahu ta'ala anhu dies before Muawiyah. the ummah at this time is progressing in ways that are amazing. All of the abadila are fighting in the same armies. They're all together. Everyone is together. The Sahaba are together. Once again, Islam is spreading throughout the world, right? Basically from the time of Uthman radiallahu anhu to the time of this agreement between Al-Hasan and Muawiyah, there was nothing happening. There was no spread of Islam, right? So once this all comes together, then they're all together once again. Now, what happens, obviously, is that Muawiyah starts to feel like his life is coming to a halt. And he had that agreement with Al-Hasan radiallahu ta'ala anhu that Al-Hasan would be the next Khalifa if he was still alive when Muawiyah passed away. But he wasn't. So now Muawiyah starts to think about who he's going to put next in his place. So he consults the people around him. Now the people of Ash-Sham, now Ash-Sham is modern day Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, Jordan. That whole area is considered Ash-Sham. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu has been in charge of Ash-Sham since Omar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. He's been there for a long time, and Muawiyah was a very capable leader. He was a very capable governor. I mean, he's capable as a leader, and that's what he said about himself too. He said, I don't see myself as the best of any of you. Maybe as a leader, but as far as fada'il are concerned, as far as virtue is concerned, he said, many of the companions are greater than me. He's nowhere near Ali or Uthman or Omar or Abu Bakr. He knows that. He's not close to them. But as a leader, he did amazing things in terms of spreading Islam and stability, and Ash-Sham became a place of prosperity in the ummah. So when Muawiyah says this to the people of Ash-Sham, what do they say? They say, put someone from your family in charge. So they actually want him to put someone from his family in charge. Why? Because they maintain then that stability. Ash-Sham still is favored, and so on and so forth. So Muawiyah decides to appoint Yazid, his son. Now, he makes this appointment in the year 57 after Hijrah. 57 Hijri. He makes this appointment that Yazid will be the one that will succeed me. There were 7 people that stood against his decision. 7 people, vocal opponents to his decision. The Abadila. All right, so all 4 of them come from that 7. Ibn Abbas, Ibn Umar, Ibn Amr, Ibn Zubayr. All 4 of them stood against that opinion. Aisha radiallahu anha stood against that appointment. Al-Husayn radiallahu ta'ala anhu obviously stood against that appointment. And the most vocal opponent at the time was Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr. So Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr was actually the one who said that if Yazid takes over, I will kill him. That we're not going to have this. We're not going to have people appointing their kids in the ummah. So Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr, he took the harshest stance. All right. Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr, though, he dies the next year, in the year 58 after Hijrah. Aisha radiallahu anha, she dies that year as well, 58 years after Hijrah, in Ramadan. Okay, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha passes away. As for the other 5, okay, that are left, so it's the Abadila and who else? Al-Husayn radiallahu ta'ala anhu. As for the other 5, Muawiyah leaves them alone. He doesn't force them. He knows that they're against the appointment. But there's no violence taking place here. Okay? They don't like what he did. They're against it. They're vocal against it. But he's not going after them and sanctioning them and imprisoning them. Now when the 60th year after Hijrah comes, so he actually appointed Yazid 2 years before, 2.5 to 3 years before. When the 60th year of Hijrah comes, Muawiyah started to feel illness. So what he does is, he then starts reinforcing the bay'ah to Yazid all around the Muslim world. Now Yazid is not a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. So he's not like the others. This is not a Sahabi. All right? And again, this is not something that was common that you pass on to your son. It's never happened before in that way. So he goes around making the people give bay'ah to Yazid, but the Abadila avoid it, as does Al-Husayn radiallahu ta'ala anhu. All right? Now, as Muawiyah is doing this, I just want to remind you guys of a hadith. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that the ummah starts off with prophethood, nubuwah. Then after nubuwah, there would be khilafa ala minhaj al-nubuwah. There would be khilafa on the prophetic methodology. It starts off with prophethood, then it goes to khilafa in accordance with the prophetic methodology. Then the Prophet ﷺ said it would be righteous kings. Muawiyah is a righteous king. He changes it from khilafah to kingdom because Muawiyah will pass this on now to his son, so it becomes a kingdom. All right, in that sense. After righteous kings, you will have tyrants and oppressors upon you. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, after that you would have khilafah ala minhaj al-nubuwah. At the end of it all, you would have Khilafah according to the prophetic methodology. Not ISIS. Khilafah ala minhaj an-nubuwwah. Let me just make that clear right now. Khilafah in accordance with the prophetic principles of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Muawiyah starts this trend. These 5 men are against it, but these 5 men are not in Asham. They're all away from Asham. They're all in between Mecca and Medina. So they're in Al-Haramain. So they're away from this whole scene anyway. So Muawiyah, as he's reinforcing the bay'ah, he calls Al-Dhahhak ibn Qais. Al-Dhahhak ibn Qais. Al-Dhahhak ibn Qais is going to be the governor, by the way, of Asham. So you guys need to know that as well. Al-Dhahhak ibn Qais, he calls him, and he tells him, when you see Yazid, because Yazid wasn't there, he was obviously somewhere else. He says, when you see Yazid, give him this advice. Tell him, number 1, إِيَّاكَ وَأَهْلُ الْعِرَاقِ. Be careful from the people of Iraq. What does he mean by that? Iraq was a very volatile situation all the time. It was always chaotic, and this was a case, subhanAllah, very early on. Governors constantly being replaced. There's a lot of fitan that take place in Iraq. So he said, be careful from Iraq. He said, don't mess with the people of Iraq. He said, anything they ask you to do, do it. He said, if they ask you to change a governor every single day, change a governor every day. Don't mess with them, just leave them satisfied. As much as you can, satisfy the people of Iraq, and don't get into it with them. He said, and then take comfort or take hold of Asham. Your support is going to come from Asham. So he said, take care of the people of Asham, keep taking care of them the way that I did, and don't let them go anywhere. Right? So the people that are instrumental within Asham, just keep them. Make Asham your strong base and just keep it as your base, and keep satisfying the people of Asham and make sure they don't go anywhere. And he said, and beware of 3 people from Quraysh. They might challenge your authority. And he said, Al-Husayn, Ibn Zubayr, and Ibn Omar. These are 3 men that are probably going to challenge your authority. He doesn't tell them kill them. He doesn't say fight them. He just says these are 3 men that I worry are probably going to challenge your authority. So you just need to know that. Because Muawiyah didn't do anything to them when they opposed in the first place. He's just saying, know that these people are not going to be with you. All right? So Muawiyah then passes away. All right? Now when Muawiyah passes away, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Yazid takes over. Now as Yazid becomes the Khalifa, Yazid then takes his father's advice. He takes care of the people of Asham. He asks the people of Iraq, do you guys want any governors changed? Do you want anything done for you? He sends them gifts and all kinds of things. He takes care of his bases basically. And then he sends a letter to Al-Walid ibn Utbah. Walid ibn Utbah is the governor of Medina. And he tells Walid ibn Utbah, he sends him 2 letters. One of them is a letter informing him that Muawiyah radiallahu anhu has passed away. That's one letter. Then the second letter he sends to him says, go and find Ibn Omar, Ibn Zubayr, and Al-Husayn, and make them give bay'ah. Take the pledge from them from now. All right? So the first letter comes that Muawiyah passes away. All right? Al-Walid ibn Utbah, he reads that. Al-Husayn radiallahu ta'ala anhu says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, yaghfir Allahu lahu wa rahimahullah. May Allah forgive him and have mercy upon him. I mean, there was peace between the family and Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Ahl al-Bayt. There was peace between them. Yazid is the one that's going to really make this nasty right now at this point. Then the next letter, Al-Walid ibn Utbah, he calls Al-Husayn radiallahu anhu in privately. And he reads him this letter and he says, Yazid wants your bay'ah. Husayn radiallahu anhu is very smart and if Husayn says to him no, at that point, he'll probably be killed. Yazid is going to be a ruthless man. So he knows how it goes. So Al-Husayn, what he says to him, he says, look, he said, if you want, I can do it publicly, it'll be better. Instead of doing it now privately, he said, why don't you gather the people and then call me and I'll do it publicly. Now what does he do? All right, as soon as Al-Walid ibn Utbah says, that's a great idea, he falls for it. Al-Husayn radiallahu anhu goes and he tells Ibn Zubayr and he tells Ibn Omar what happened and what's about to happen. And he tells Ibn Abbas and he tells them, he tells the Abadila, because they were the ones that stood against it, what's going to happen. So all of them, with the exception of Ibn Umar, flee. They left Al-Madinah. All right? Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, again, it's not clear whether Ibn Umar took bay'ah to Yazid Ibn Umar didn't want the fighting, he didn't want the problem. So Ibn Umar, it seems to be that he did take bay'ah to Yazid but didn't do anything. He just gave him his bay'ah just to get Al-Walid off of his back and be able to focus on what he did. Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, it's also not clear. It seems like Ibn Abbas as well took the bay'ah just to avoid the situation, because Ibn Abbas also was not one to fight. Alright? Al-Hussein and Ibn Zubayr, and Ibn Amr, he did take the bay'ah as well. It seems to be the case as well. That they took the bay'ah and they left discontented. They just didn't want to deal with Yazid. They didn't do anything. They kind of withdrew themselves. But as far as Ibn Zubayr and Al-Hussein, they go now and they set up shop in Mecca. So they set up now in Mecca. They are clearly revolting against Yazid. They're not giving Yazid the bay'ah because they know what's happening here and they understand it. And subhanAllah, actually, the way that it's described is that Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas were actually coming back from Umrah at the time. And Ibn Zubayr and Hussein met them on the way out of Medina and they told them what happened. And so Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas, they went, and then Ibn Zubayr and Hussein continued on to Mecca. There's even a narration that Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he gathered his family and he warned them about revolting and he warned them about causing chaos and so on and so forth. And he mentioned the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that on the Day of Judgment, every betrayer will be holding a flag, a bearer that would show him to be a betrayer. So don't betray the Muslims, don't betray those in leadership and so on and so forth. That was Ibn Umar's opinion, and that's what happens. Now, Al-Hussein and Ibn Zubayr, the word is getting out now that they're resisting this, that they're not going to be a part of this. Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he's getting letters from Kufa in Iraq. And when we do a biography one day, inshallah, of Al-Hussein, then we can go into much more detail of this. But Al-Hussein is getting letters from Iraq that come here and we will support you. Come to Kufa and we will support you. We're ready to revolt against Yazid ibn Muawiyah. We're ready to fight against this tyrant. Just come here and we will support you. Ibn Zubayr is setting up things in Mecca. So Ibn Zubayr is becoming the de facto leader in Mecca, right? As far as Al-Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he's considering these letters over and over again from Iraq. So he sends Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib. Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib. That's his cousin, his first cousin. He sends Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib with his family to go to Kufa. He said, take your family, because that way people won't feel threatened, like you're going there to do anything. If you're with your family, they're not going to feel that way. And he said, don't take the main route. Take a back route. All right, and he sent with him a few people to go with him, so that he would make it. And he said, tell me what you think about it. Tell me what the situation is. And he said that if it seems to be what these people are saying, then I'm going to follow you to Iraq. I'll be there soon. Now, Ibn Aqil, Muslim ibn Aqil, he goes there, and he takes his sons, Muhammad and Ibrahim, with him to show that no intention to fight. And he takes a back route. Now, they get lost on the back route. Okay? So the guide actually dies of dehydration. They're like lost in the desert. All right? And it takes them a long time to find Kufa. And Muslim ibn Aqil, he writes back to Al-Hussein telling him, that I don't think this is going to work and so on and so forth. Al-Hussein tells him, just keep on going. So he finally gets to Kufa. All right? So when he gets to Kufa, when Muslim ibn Hussein gets to Kufa, he starts to meet with the people over there that are writing these letters. The man that was the governor appointed by Yazid in Al-Kufa was a Sahabi by the name of Nu'man ibn al-Bashir radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Nu'man ibn al-Bashir, a very famous companion. Nu'man ibn al-Bashir is not one who's going to kill anybody. And he's not that type of person. So when Nu'man ibn al-Bashir hears about what Hussein is doing, Nu'man ibn al-Bashir leaves him alone. He doesn't fight him. He's not going to kill Muslim ibn Aqil, who's also a companion. He's not going to do anything to these people. So basically, Muslim ibn Aqil is organizing a revolt right under his nose. And he doesn't care. So when Yazid finds out about that this is taking place, by that time Muslim ibn Aqil had already taken bay'ah from over 15,000 people to now fight with Al-Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, to be on the side of Al-Hussein, to fight against Yazid ibn Muawiyah. So Yazid ibn Muawiyah, he sends a man, and this is a man, subhanAllah, that our texts just bear witness to his crimes and his bloodshed. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. You need to remember that name. It's a dark part of our history. He's a ruthless man. Yazid ibn Muawiyah, he sends him to Kufa to replace Nu'man ibn al-Bashir. Now when Ibn Ziyad makes his way to Kufa, Muslim ibn Aqil, he knows that this is taking place. So Muslim ibn Aqil, he goes into hiding. He takes bay'ah from people, but he goes into hiding. All right, he goes into hiding. No one really knows where he is. Ubaidullah bin Ziyad, he removes Nu'man al-Bashir, sends him away. And Ubaidullah bin Ziyad, his first khutbah, he said, anyone who is sheltering any of those who are scheming against Yazid, I'm going to crucify him on the door of his house to make an example out of him. So anyone who's given bay'ah, anyone who's pledged, and anyone who is sheltering those people is going to die. Now Ibn Ziyad wants to find out where Muslim ibn Aqil is. So what does he do? He sets up a spy. All right, and the name of the spy was Ma'qil. And Ma'qil is supposed to go and act like he's a supporter. And so eventually he finds out where Muslim ibn Aqil is. And he finds him in the house of a man by the name of Hani ibn Urwa. Not Urwa ibn Zubayr, another Urwa. Hani ibn Urwa. Okay, so he finds Muslim ibn Aqil there, and that's where Muslim ibn Aqil was holding his secret meetings, and that's where he's meeting with people. And so he goes there, and basically he's just filling Ubaidullah bin Ziyad in about everything that he's getting from Muslim ibn Aqil. So then Ubaidullah bin Ziyad, he calls Hani ibn Urwa to him. And he asks Hani ibn Urwa, he says, first he asks Ma'qil. Ma'qil is with him, the spy. He's standing next to him, and he says, do you know him? And Ma'qil said, yes. And he asked Hani ibn Urwa, he said, do you have Muslim ibn Aqil with you? Hani ibn Urwa initially he said no. And he started to produce witnesses against him. So he brought Ma'qil and he brought other people that he threatened and that are basically saying Muslim ibn Aqil was staying at his house. So Ibn Ziyad says, go get him. Hani says, Wallahi, even if he was right behind me, I would not give him up to you. So Ubaidullah bin Ziyad, he hits him in the face with the back of his sword. And he starts to beat on him, and he almost kills him. And actually people thought that he was killed, and he throws him into a room and he locks him in there. So now the word is getting out now that Hani ibn Urwa has been killed. So now word is starting to get out around that something has happened, and so on and so forth, and that we found out where he is. So whenever Muslim ibn Aqil heard about that, all right, he sends a letter to Hussein to come right away. So he goes into hiding. He says to Hussein, come right away. We have to start this right away because things are getting nasty already. So it's not, initially, and it seems like initially it was intended not to be violent actually. The initial thing was to basically just remove the authority from Yazid. And that's the thing, that the intentions were not to go there and fight with weapons and so on and so forth initially. But when this response is taking place this way, then obviously now it's getting violent. So Muslim sends a letter to Hussein, and he says to Hussein, I've got over 15,000 people that are ready. They've given bay'ah to you. They will fight with you. Just come on, make your way to Iraq. All right? Now while this is taking place, Muslim, he summons his people. And they all abandon him. So he only has a few thousand first. Then Ubaidullah finds out about that gathering. And Ubaidullah bin Ziyad amasses this huge army, and all of these people leave Muslim ibn Aqil standing by himself. So what does Muslim ibn Aqil do? He runs. He tries to run away. And he escapes and he gets to a house on the outskirts of Kufa. Ubaidullah, his troops found him. And they waited outside the door and they called out to him and he didn't answer. And then they called the people of that household out. They killed them. And they basically held them hostage. They brought Muslim ibn Aqil out. Muslim ibn Aqil, he came out, he fought, but they beat him and this is subhanAllah Sahabi. This is the nephew of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the cousin of Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu. They beat him mercilessly and they brought him dragging to Ubaidullah bin Ziyad. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, he murders him, he kills him, and he kills Hani ibn Urwa. So these are the two people that were instrumental. And he throws their bodies in the middle of the souk, mutilated, to send a message. Anyone who tries to challenge Yazid is going to be killed this way. Now here's the problem. Hussein has no idea any of this is going on. The last communication that has come to Hussein radiallahu anhu is that you have 15,000 people that are waiting for you to receive you here. So Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he's telling the people, he's telling the Abadila about what's going on. The Abadila, subhanAllah, all four of them are trying to stop him from going out. Not knowing what's happened, what they say to him is that these people cannot be trusted. These people cannot be trusted. It's too volatile over there. They can't be trusted. They will betray you. They betrayed your father. They betrayed your brother Al-Hassan. They will betray. When Al-Hassan was in charge of Kufa, they looted his house. I mean, they were merciless with him. So they told Hussein, just set up, some of them suggested set up. Abdullah ibn Zubayr said, just basically, let's do it from Mecca. All right, Abdullah ibn Abbas said from Yemen, go set up there, it's better over there. We talked about that. Ibn Omar tried to just talk him out of the whole thing altogether. Very emotional. All of these meetings are very emotional, just trying to stop Al-Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu for going. But Al-Hussein thinks that the people of Kufa are sincere. They sent all these letters, they're going to take care of him. So obviously Al-Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he makes his way over there. And that's where the massacre of Karbala takes place. Al-Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu was massacred by Ubaydullah bin Ziyad. Okay, Ubaydullah bin Ziyad is the one who beheaded Al-Hussein. He's the one who desecrated the body of Al-Hussein radiallahu. He's a merciless human being, subhanAllah, a violent tyrant. Now when that news got out, that Al-Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu was massacred, and that family members of the Prophet ﷺ were massacred and humiliated. And what that did was, it basically united the rest of the ummah against Yazid. All right? And so it kind of backfired on them. To kill Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu really backfired on them. That's when Abdullah ibn Zubayr officially announced his revolt. When Al-Hussein was killed, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr started to take bay'ah from people. So that's when Abdullah ibn Zubayr now declares khilafah. All right, and this is, he was the de facto leader. He was in charge of Mecca already from the year 60 after Hijrah. He was, once Yazid was announced, he became the leader of Mecca. But now, people are coming to Abdullah ibn Zubayr and they're actually giving him bay'ah to make him the Khalifa radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Mecca automatically gives him bay'ah. Medina, they hear about it and they join right away, and they kick Walid ibn Uqba out. And they put Abdullah ibn Handala radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Handala radiallahu anhu, the very famous Sahabi, they put his son in charge of Medina. So they send them out they send Yazid's people out of Medina. So Medina and Mecca are firm. When Yazid finds out about this, he sends an army to Mecca. All right? While they're on their way to Mecca, to basically, to kill Abdullah ibn Zubayr, they hear about the revolt in Medina. So they redirect to Medina. Medina was closer to them than Mecca, coming from Asham. They redirect to Medina, and that's when the massacre of Harra takes place. We talked about the massacre of Harra that Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As passed away in, where many of the companions did, that the Prophet ﷺ predicted, he prophesied that Medina would come under siege. They held the people of Medina under siege and realized now this is an army devoid of Sahaba. These aren't Sahaba anymore. These are not Sahaba anymore. So they killed 5,000 people in Al-Madinah, and they looted the city like it was a city of kuffar. They looted the houses, subhanAllah. I mean, they treated the people in the worst way possible. I mean, they completely desecrated Medina. Now, they were under a man by the name of Muslim ibn Uqba. His name was Muslim ibn Uqba. On their way to Mecca, Muslim dies. Right after, subhanAllah, right after the massacre of Al-Harra, he just dies a sudden death. All right, so they put another person in charge, and the person that they put in charge, his name is Husayn ibn Numayr. Husayn, not Hussein, Husayn with a Sad, Husayn ibn Numayr. So he takes charge of that army, and essentially, what's happening now around the world is people are hearing about this. So people are joining Ibn Zubayr, not even officially, but their hearts are starting to lean towards Ibn Zubayr. He's becoming the Khalifa of the Muslims without even conquering anywhere. SubhanAllah, even there's a man by the name of Abu Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. Abu Mukhtar al-Thaqafi is the cousin of Al-Hajjaj al-Thaqafi, who is going to also play a very prominent role. Even he aligns himself with Ibn Zubayr. Even the Khawarij align themselves with Ibn Zubayr. Even most of the Khawarij say, enough is enough. You killed the family of the Prophet ﷺ. That's something that they would not even do. And they hate Yazid so much, and they hate the governorship of Bani Umayyah so much, that they say we'd rather take Ibn Zubayr against them. So people are just naturally joining Ibn Zubayr from all over the world. So Husayn ibn Numayr has an assignment to basically finish Ibn Zubayr. So he surrounds Mecca in the year 64 after Hijrah. The year 64 after Hijrah. Okay? Now, Ibn Zubayr, that's where he was based, so he was strong there in Mecca. So he protects the city, they can't get into Mecca. So they set up, subhanAllah, they set up catapults where they will shoot fireballs, right? They will shoot big stones in Mecca. And these people, this is again something that they've never seen before. These people are raining stones and fire stones on the people of Mecca and even on the women and the children. They're just shooting them into Mecca and they're killing people randomly. And Ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he sets up tents around the Kaaba thinking that they would at least have the decency not to fire near the Kaaba, but they end up firing and they end up hitting the Kaaba as well. And that's where Ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu was actually in salah when that happened. And when the Kaaba's cloth caught fire, he was so close to the Kaaba that his thobe caught fire as well. And the people came to him and started putting the fire out. He didn't even notice. SubhanAllah, he was in his salah. He didn't even notice that he was on fire. And so the people started to do that. Now, while that's taking place, so they're resisting, Ibn Zubayr, he rebuilds the Kaaba. That's one thing that's very important to understand. He rebuilds the Kaaba. But he doesn't just rebuild the Kaaba, he rebuilds it in its original form. Aisha radiallahu anha, she narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said that the Kaaba is actually not the shape. It used to be rectangular. It used to be rectangular. And the foundations of Ibrahim a.s. were rectangular and the doors were low. There was a door on each side to where a person could walk in and walk out. He said, your people, Quraysh, they ran out of money because they wanted to build the Kaaba with halal money and they didn't have much halal money. This is before Islam, but they said no money with prostitution or alcohol or gambling or whatever it is. So they rebuilt the Kaaba and they ran out of money, so they were only able to build it like a square. And so they put what's known as obviously Hijr Ismail Hatim today. They put that there, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ would only touch Al-Rukn al-Yamani and Al-Hajr al-Aswad. The Yemeni corner is the original foundation. It's one of the original corners of the Kaaba, and he would touch Al-Hajr al-Aswad. And why did they raise the doors? So that they could limit who would get in, so that they could only let royal people get in and so on and so forth. So Ibn Zubayr, he rebuilt the Kaaba in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, or with the way that it was originally built. And that caused an uproar and things of that sort. And actually Ibn Abbas recommended him not to do that. Ibn Abbas told him just build it the way it was built, because so that you don't bring unnecessary fitna right now. Right? People would not be ready for this right now. It's not the time to do that. But Ibn Zubayr, he did it anyway because he felt like it's closer to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, while Mecca is being besieged, and this is taking place, you have to understand that there are very, very, very few of the Sahaba that are still alive. Very few. Salama radiallahu anha, who is the last of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ alive, she passes away too. So there are no more Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, no more mothers of the believers, no more, very few companions that are around. Pretty much it's the Abadila and a few others that are around. Okay? So he's really fighting with Tabi'een and so on and so forth. Whenever they're besieging Mecca, while they're besieging Mecca, the news comes that Yazid passed away, that Yazid died. So once the news that Yazid passed away came, Yazid appointed his son, Muawiyah, before he passed away. He had a son named Muawiyah. He appointed him. The thing about Muawiyah is that Muawiyah was very young and he was actually very religious. So Muawiyah, the son of Yazid, he becomes Khalifa and he gets sick right away. All right, and so he's going to die within a month of being appointed Khalifa. And he doesn't choose a successor. And they say, why don't you choose a successor? He said, because I wanted to choose a Khalifa the way that Abu Bakr chose one, which is Abu Bakr chose Omar, the most righteous man. But he said, I found no one amongst you like Omar. And he said, and I wanted to choose a shura the way that Omar did, but I found none of you worthy of being on a shura. So he just left it alone. He just died basically without anything. So what happens now is that there is no Khalifa. Because he appointed no successor in Ash-Sham, there is no Khalifa, so the only Khalifa is who? Ibn Zubayr now. The only Khalifa of the Muslims now is Ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. When that news reaches Hussein ibn Numayr as he's besieging Mecca, then he stops the siege and he sends a letter to Ibn Zubayr saying that I'm pledging my bay'ah to you now. You're the only Khalifa that's left, we have no Amir, I'm pledging my bay'ah to you. So he came and he offered to fight alongside Ibn Zubayr. Ibn Zubayr told him to go away. And in fact, because of the crimes that he committed. In fact, Ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, even when he was at his weakest moment, when he found people in his army talking bad about any of the companions, he kicked them out. Even when he needed them. SubhanAllah, he walked around and he found people cursing Ali radiallahu anhu. He said, get out, I don't need you. He found people speaking ill of Uthman radiallahu anhu. He told them to go away. He didn't want people in his army that were going to speak bad about any of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he sends Husayn ibn Numayr away. And Ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, now people are coming from all over the world officially to give him bay'ah. So he's getting the official bay'ah from Iraq. And in fact, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, whenever he heard that Yazid died, he fled Iraq because he knew they would come after him. So he left Iraq. He ran back to Asham. So Iraq went to the brother of Abdullah ibn Zubayr, okay, Mus'ab ibn Zubayr, as per what we mentioned, the narration when they were younger. Egypt sent they sent their delegation. And even Asham, this is an important part of history, even Asham, because this therefore makes Ibn Zubayr, by consensus, the Khalifa of the Muslims for a time. You cannot dispute that Ibn Zubayr was Amir al-Mu'mineen radiallahu anhu for a time, the entire Ummah. Even Asham, the person that was in charge of Asham that Muawiyah left was Al-Dhahhak ibn Qais. Al-Dhahhak ibn Qais was a righteous man. He sends his bay'ah to Ibn Zubayr right away on behalf of Asham. Now, when that happens, the entire world now is under Ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu. Okay? Some of the remnants of Bani Umayyah, they're kind of hiding out within Asham, around the area of Jordan, where modern day Jordan is. And what they do is, they've given their bay'ah, they have nothing left to do. They're just kind of staying away from the people until the emotions calm down and so on and so forth. So then they decide eventually, amongst them was Marwan ibn al-Hakam, and he's the leader of them at that time. Marwan ibn al-Hakam, they decide, you know what, let's go give bay'ah to Ibn Zubayr. There's nothing left. Khalas, it's over. The Umayyad dynasty is over. There's only one Khalifa now, it's Ibn Zubayr. And he's the first and only Khalifa that would ever rule the Ummah from Mecca, subhanAllah. It was Ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So they make their way towards Mecca. Alright? As they're making their way towards Mecca, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad finds out that they're going to give bay'ah to Ibn Zubayr. And he goes and he runs after them and he tries to talk them out of it. And he says, look, we've done this before. I can unite the people under you once again. Trust me on this. Just you declare amongst yourselves a Khalifa, and I will go and I will bring the people of Iraq back to you. I will bring the people of Egypt back to you, and so on and so forth. And he succeeds in convincing them. Subhanallah. So he ruins it. And the ulama, they say the reason why he did that is because he knew that if they gave it to Abdullah ibn Zubayr, the first person he would come after is Ubaydullah bin Ziyad for the crimes and the atrocities that he committed. So they give their bay'ah now to Marwan ibn al-Hakam. Marwan ibn al-Hakam goes back to Asham and he tells Al-Dhahhak, I'm the Khalifa now. Al-Dhahhak says, too late, we already gave the bay'ah to Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Marwan ibn al-Hakam sets up an army in Asham and they fight against Al-Dhahhak, Al-Dhahhak ibn Qais in Asham. Basically, he mounts an army and they fight against him to basically reclaim the office of Khilafah within Asham. All right. Now here's the thing. Al-Dhahhak he had a much bigger army because the people had accepted Ibn Zubayr already. So he had, At-Tabari rahimahullah, he says that there was, he had 30,000, whereas Marwan had about 13,000. So his army was a lot larger. All right. But here's the thing. Bani Umayyah still had the keys to Baytul Mal, to the treasury. So what did they do? Those group of people, they went and they took the money from Baytul Mal and they started buying people off until their army got larger and they completely, they defeated Al-Dhahhak ibn Qais and they re-established their Khilafah now within Asham. And as they did that now, so subhanAllah, there's so much confusion now, just so you can understand the fitna and the ummah at this point, the confusion now. So now you have officially two Khalifas. You have Abdullah ibn Zubayr, you have Marwan ibn al-Hakam, you have a group of people in Iraq that called themselves At-Tawwabin, the repenters. All right, and who are At-Tawwabin? They're a group of people that decided that, we let Al-Hussein down, radiallahu anhu, we need to avenge his death. So our loyalty is to the family of the Prophet ﷺ, and we're going to go and find Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and kill him. Okay, so At-Tawwabin has their movement and they pledge to Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah doesn't know, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, we talked about him, the son of Ali, he doesn't know that people are making him Khalifa. He has no idea. He's not even there, but they're saying now, because he's one of the children of Ali and he's alive, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, they say, we're giving our bay'ah to him. Okay, when he finds out, he says, I reject this bay'ah, I've given my bay'ah to Ibn Zubayr, but they're a growing movement there as well. So you have these different movements that are coming together. So you have At-Tawwabin, you have Abu Mukhtar Al-Thaqafi, who's now trying to grow his own type of thing. And they go to Hajj, subhanAllah, they go to Hajj. And in the year 71 after Hijrah, during the Hajj season, there are 4 groups at Arafah. All of them are claiming to be the righteous, and all of them are claiming to be the legitimate ummah. And they're all claiming to be Umara in Hajj, the leaders in Hajj. And it's just such confusion that's taking place over there.